Hi, this is Tim Donner with the latest Election 2020 Roundtable from LNTV. Is Pete Buttigieg an inspiration or an empty suit? Does opposition from never-Trumpers within the Republican Party threaten President Trump's reelection? What are the odds makers saying about the presidential race? And of the now 24 Democratic presidential candidates, which one is the most hapless? We'll talk through all of that with our political correspondent, chief political correspondent Graham Noble, and national correspondent Joe Schaefer, and our managing editor Mark Angelides. So Graham, let's start with you. You've just written an in-depth piece on Mayor Pete Buttigieg, entitled New Flavor of the Month or Empty Suit. Share with us your thinking about Mayor Buttigieg.
Well, Tim, I think he has made possibly a bit of a strategic error, a tactical error, if you might say. I guess I'd like to start off by saying that I do believe that when the presidential field of candidates for their party's nomination is whittled down to maybe 5 or 6, I honestly believe that Pete Buttigieg will be one of those remaining 5 or 6. I don't necessarily think he's got what it takes to go all the way. I think we should be somewhat brutally honest about the fact that his sexual orientation, the fact that he is openly gay, the first openly gay presidential candidate, has a lot to do with the fact that he is currently flavor of the month. But also, we should remember that he did unsuccessfully in 2017 run for the chair of the Democratic National Committee, and he dropped out of that race because he simply did not have the support within the party to compete against the other contenders there. So I think his appeal is somewhat overblown, and I also think he made a mistake by virtue of the fact that he's the mayor of South Bend, Indiana. He could have set himself up to compete with Joe Biden for the heartland vote, for the Midwestern vote. But instead, he chooses to somewhat disparage white people in general. He likes to go on about the threat of white supremacy. And he also disparages Christianity. You know, he decided to pick a fight with Mike Pence of all people. And regardless of what you think of Mike Pence's politics or his religion, I think it goes without saying that he's probably, I would say, one of the most decent human beings in the national political arena. And so to pick a fight with him wasn't so good. So Buttigieg could have set himself up to perhaps be a strong contender in the heartland, but instead he has decided that if you are a white Christian, then you're basically what's wrong with this country. So he didn't do himself any favors there. He doesn't have really a great deal of support among black voters, and he doesn't have anything in his policy stance that sets him apart from any of the rest of the field. So all in all, that's why I characterize him as something of an empty suit when it really comes down to it.
Yeah, it's rather remarkable that here's a man, Pete Buttigieg, who's not only gay, but married to another man. And yet he said on CNN that he would love to have a joust with President Trump about whose view of marriage is more traditional. So that's the Democratic primary circa 2019. Joe, let's turn to you. Republican Congressman Justin Amash has said he favors impeachment of Donald Trump. Bill Weld is running against Trump for president in the Republican Party. And of course, TV viewers everywhere seem to only get anti-Trump Republicans like Joe Scarborough and Nicole Wallace on MSNBC or Anna Navarro on CNN. Only 2 recent presidents, Joe, were challenged in primaries. George Bush, 41, in 1992, and Jimmy Carter in 1980, and both of them lost. Does Trump face trouble within his own party?
He faces no real trouble at all in terms of getting the nomination, but excuse me, what these never Trumpers in the media who wants to prop them up wants to do is just make the fact that there is somebody else running as some kind of historical thing, like, oh wow, he's a sitting president and he has a challenger. Well, that challenger doesn't have a snowball's chance in heck, but they're still acting like it's a big deal. Nobody cares about Bill Weld. Nobody's talking about Bill Weld except for the media. There's no traction here. The other guy, Larry Hogan in Maryland, who's thinking about maybe doing something to governor of Maryland, nobody wants him. He's a mushy, old school rhino establishment Republican. So there's no grassroots push here. This is astroturf by the establishment and their media allies. There's no threat to Trump, but they think just by presenting somebody that means that it's significant. It means the Republicans aren't going to rally around Trump. And, you know, it's not just a Republican thing. The American people who voted for Donald Trump have not abandoned this president. They are going to rally around Donald Trump. So they're spitting in the wind. They know Trump's getting the nomination, and they would love to hurt him any way they can. But this is not going to substantially hurt him.
All right, Mark, let's turn to you, because we've seen polls that say Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, whatever, and a bunch of other Democrats who seem to have little chance at even the nomination, would beat Trump in the general election. That's what the polls are actually saying, which seems hard to believe. But let's talk about people who actually lay their money down. What are the betting odds on the presidential race these days?
Well, the betting odds really haven't changed, which is quite a bit to do with Trump's stickativity, I guess. I mean, we hear about his approval ratings quite a lot, but there really hasn't been much change. According to Rasmussen, he's been sitting around 50%, give or take a point here or there, for basically a year. So there's not much change there. And in the betting odds, it's pretty much the same thing. He's an 11 to 10 to win the presidency. 11 to 10. Mm-hmm. So for those who aren't big gamblers, that means that if you bet $10, you get $1. That's your profit margin. That's how much of a sure thing it is at the moment. But the Democrat field is wildly interesting. Well, in my opinion, it's wildly interesting at the moment. Obviously, you've got the polls are saying Joe Biden's got a great lead over everybody else, and he has got a good lead in the polls. But in the betting money, there's really three candidates who actually have a chance of winning the nomination: Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris. Now, Joe Biden, he's squeezing the numbers every single week, just a little bit by little bit. Whereas Bernie Sanders and Kamala, there's about half a point between them. But between those two and Joe Biden, you're talking almost 2 points, which is significant in gambling money. That's a significant difference.
Yeah, certainly Joe Biden has opened up a gaping hole between himself and Bernie Sanders. But it seems to me 24 candidates in the field now, 24, the dirty dozens, some may call them. Seems to me that Biden's lead says a whole lot more about the 23 other candidates than it does about Joe Biden, who's hardly considered an electoral powerhouse. But now, gentlemen, go ahead, Mark.
So yes, in terms of Joe Biden winning the presidency, he's a 5-1 underdog. And bearing in mind how much money is going to be spent on this next race, it's over $100 million, I'm sure. Would you bet $100 million on a 5-1 long shot?
Well, I think that kind of lays it right out there that Donald Trump is just under even money, and Joe Biden, the overwhelming frontrunner for the Democrats, is at 5-1. So the betting odds seem to put Trump in a good place, barring, of course, an unexpected recession, because Trump, of course, will be running on the economy, which in a peacetime presidential election is always the most important issue. All right, gentlemen, now it's time to actually have some fun here. Not that we don't all the time anyway, but it's time for each of you having culled the 24-person Democratic field of presidential candidates to cast your vote for the most hapless of the 24 candidates. Now, hapless is a word that's well thought out, not necessarily the most radical, not necessarily the emptiest suit, not necessarily the least successful, but within your own definition of the word hapless, which of the Democratic candidates would figure to finish at the top of your list of haplessness? Let's go with you, Graham, first.
Well, first of all, if the word you had chosen, Tim, would have been hopeless, I would have said then it's it's a tight 3-horse race between Robert Francis O'Rourke, Mayor Bill de Blasio, and Kirsten Gillibrand. But since we're talking about hapless, I would have to go with the latter of those three. I believe Kirsten Gillibrand is, you can't even say she sunk like a stone, because she was never anywhere near the surface of the water to begin with. And I think the one thing that she came out with as an explanation why she's getting absolutely no traction whatsoever is a very Hillary Clinton-esque claim, and that is that, well, it's because nobody likes women. You know, everybody's a misogynist all of a sudden, and so it's because she's a woman that she's not going anywhere. But I think in terms of the hapless candidates, I mean, a lot of the less well-known ones could hardly be described as hapless, because, you know, they're actually making themselves famous just by being in this race. But she was a name already. She was out there, and she's gone absolutely nowhere. And I personally think that she'll be one of the first to drop out.
Okay, so Graham's vote is cast for Kirsten Gillibrand, which is a shame for me personally, because that's who I was going to pick. But let's go, Joe, let's go to you second. I mean, this is a field of truly unimpressive candidates. Which one is the most hapless of them all?
Well, you told us to have a backup answer, because Graham took my answer too. I thought Gillibrand is clearly the one who I don't know, she's just making a mess out of it. It's insane. But yeah, I have a backup. I had it already, and I would go with Cory Booker, because I thought he really. Sorry, Mark.
That's my backup too.
That's my backup.
Great minds think alike. But
you probably know why. I thought it was pathetic how his staff whined about the attention that Pete Buttigieg is getting, and he was sort of like, wait, I'm supposed to be the flavor of the month. I'm the young black male, former small town mayor. You're all supposed to be fawning over me. Why are you fawning over this other identity politics Democrat? And I thought that just revealed so much about him. There's no plan. There's no substance to his campaign. He was just sort of hoping to hop on the vapor fumes left from Obama from 2008, and it's not happening. And it's like, okay, I've got nothing else. That seems to be what his campaign is all about. So yeah, he's right up there with Gillibrand in my mind, in that it just hapless is a good word to describe it.
Well, in some ways, Booker, Senator Spartacus, might actually be more hapless than Kirsten Gillibrand because of how far he's dropped. I mean, when he got into the race, Booker was at maybe 12%, 10 or so. Now he's, barely, he's down in the same territory Joe Biden was in the first two times he ran for president, which is in the 1% range, maybe 2%. And he's, and Senator Spartacus has come up with the most severe gun control agenda. Some would call it a gun control manifesto that is truly frightening. The most radical gun-grabbing agenda, I think, of any presidential candidate in American history. And Mark, with apologies to you, I'm going to go next because I'm afraid that you're going to pick my third choice for the most hapless candidate. So I get to go third. And it's a really tough call, but I'm going to have to go with Beto O'Rourke, aka Robert Francis O'Rourke. Again, because even more so than Cory Booker, I mean, here was a guy who rolled out his campaign under great fanfare. I mean, he was all style, no substance, rolled out his campaign with an appearance on the cover of Vanity Fair, where he said he was born to run for president, and boy, has he come to regret that remark. I mean, there is no there. It reminds me of the 1984 campaign when Walter Mondale was running against Gary Hart, and he used the memorable phrase from a much-watched ad at the time that said, "Where's the beef? Where's the beef?" There is no beef with Beto O'Rourke, and the fact of him being an empty suit has just been unmasked more and more over time. And so I think in terms of anticipation versus results, Beto O'Rourke has to be the most hapless, certainly the most overrated, and the most underperforming compared to the expectations. Okay, Mark, you're left with the other 21 candidates to pick from. Who's the most hapless in your mind?
Okay, I would have to go with Senator Elizabeth Warren, and I'll tell you why. She's I've got to admire her for trying to run a different type of campaign. So instead of doing the big announcements and trying the big tour, she's doing a series of small town halls, and she's doing a lot of them. And her supporters and her work group, her campaign group, they're trying to get this idea across that she's a woman with simple solutions to problems. And so there's a hashtag campaign saying, "I've got a plan for that." And you know what? She does have a plan for that, but all her plans are bad. I mean, that's the problem. That should be the follow-on line. "I've got a plan for that, and it won't work." So it's quite unfortunate, because it's interesting doing these small town halls. It's great. She just hasn't caught fire with it. And a part of that is because she's done a few video campaigns as well, very, very folksy, introducing her husband, sat at home pretending that she knows how to drink a beer, which is fantastic. She almost looks human. It's fantastic.
Almost.
Almost. Nearly. It nearly looks like she could actually exist in the real world. But yeah, I got to say that after my first and my second choices were taken, I got to say Elizabeth Warren. She just hasn't got a plan that will work.
Well, I will say this, that Elizabeth Warren is sort of the other bookend to Beto O'Rourke, in the sense that, you know, he's all huff and puff and all style and no substance. And she is all substance. I mean, she has the most specific set of policy plans of any of the Democratic candidates. And I will say also that I do support her not very specific yet plan, but plan nevertheless to break up the big tech giants like Facebook and Twitter and Google and demonopolize social media, so to speak. And that's something that many conservatives also support. Okay, so this has been a fascinating and wide-ranging discussion. Our thanks to Chief Political Correspondent Graham Noble and National Correspondent Joe Schaefer, and our Managing Editor from across the pond, Mark Angelides. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Tim.
And we hope you like this video and that you'll subscribe to the LibertyNation.com YouTube channel, where you get more of these videos, plus our 5 Facts videos, our own TV show, Truth is making a comeback with our editor-in-chief, Lisa K. Donner, plus our radio show and podcasts, and so much more by subscribing to the LibertyNation.com YouTube channel. I'm Tim Donner. We'll see you next time on the 2020 Election Roundtable.